Hi everyone and welcome to Asamu Rat Care. So today's 12 days of enrichment is going to be looking at jumping. So jumping's quite a fun one for rats. They're quite capable. If any of you have ever tried keeping a rat in a playpen, you'll quickly realise that they can jump surprisingly high. I think it's fairly easy for them to clear 3-4 foot. If they've got help particularly, they can jump off things, so that's vertically. They can jump quite a long way horizontally. I'm not sure exactly how far, but I have done over 1 metre with my own rats in the past. You might see what some of the current guys can do at the moment. But they jump very capably. They're very much limited by the eyesight in terms of jumping and knowing where they're going to land, and you'll find that rats that have poorer sight actually have a bit more kind of challenges jumping unless it's something that's very, very clear. And I'll show you some tips to do that for out of the cage activities later on. So I thought I'd start off by doing a little make, and then we'll have a look what's already existing in the cage and fit it in the cage, otherwise they'll all kind of like pile out, you know, like they do. And then we'll try an out of the cage activity. So all you need for this is Pringles tubes. Now I've got this left from last time I did this make. Basically all you need to do is cut a length of the Pringle tube. You can use the ends. In fact, they're slightly better to use because they've got a bit more natural stiffness, and all will become clear shortly. So you can use a plastic end that bolts on, that's quite useful in some ways, or you can use the hard metal end. But you'll notice that this is ever so slightly squishy. And that means that if we're going to use it for what we are, which we're going to make a perch that kind of fastens to the side of the cage, we want to add a bit of strength, otherwise gradually this will squish into the point where it's not really that useful for the rats anymore. So how we're going to do this is ice cream sticks or popsicle sticks or lolly sticks or whatever you want to call them. These are quite useful because they're quite strong, they're very cheap, you can pick them up from any craft store. All I'm going to do with this is I'm going to work out a size that is just slightly over. So if I do that, I'm going to I want it to slightly push outwards, and the reason for that is because then it will hold in place without me having to do anything. Because it's going in the cage, I don't particularly want to put any glue or anything. So then I just cut it to size, and then we will squish it in. Let's pop this one in the middle. So you can see right there, it's got something in there. Now I'm going to make a few of these. The idea between making a few is you can overlap them. Again, just measuring for size. Would be good if you could see a little bit bigger. Let's move you in, you don't really need to see my head, it's quite boring. Anyway, there, that might make it a bit easier to see. So again, just measuring and cutting slightly oversized. The kind of off ends of this are going to be quite useful for the rats to find on free range. You need a good heavy pair of scissors to do this. So this one I'm putting slightly further along and just wedging it in again. So now we're quite strong in a couple of different directions, and I'm going to make another one for the bottom bit here. If you do a longer bit, you'll have to put in more of these. You can see it's already squashed a bit from having the existing one in. They might kind of splinter a bit, but that's fine. For what we're using them, we're only using them in compression, and it's fairly strong in that. So you kind of get the idea. We've got kind of several bits in here that are kind of holding this fairly firm. Right, so we've got a basic shape. Next, what we're going to do is add a few holes. So pick an end that's kind of roughly flat. So I've done a really bad job of cutting this side. I don't know if you can see that there. It's a interestingly angled piece. Whereas this side is slightly flatter. I might just trim a little bit of it off. It was a quick job. The idea is this side is going to sit flush against the cage bars, which will make more sense shortly. So I've picked my side that's going to go against the cage bars. All I need to do now is add some holes. So I've got a small pair of scissors here. Be careful. If there's kids involved, make sure you do this yourself, parents, because it's a high chance of stabbing yourself in the finger. I usually do. But it doesn't really matter so much if it's me. So you want to make 4 around the circumference, roughly even. It doesn't really matter if it's not quite perfect. There we go. So there's 4 through. Now what I'm going to do, so I've got some duct tape. It's nicely patterned with wood pattern, which appeals to me, but you can use whatever pattern you want. Or actually, to be fair, if you want it as a quick jobby, you don't need to use the duct tape. The reason I use the duct tape is it slightly protects the cardboard from the pee, which means it lasts longer. It will lift off eventually, but until then it'll do its job and it will look pretty, which is a rare one for me. I don't normally do pretty, but it's something to give it a go. Right, so all I'm doing here, and it doesn't matter, I should say, if you get wrinkles in the tape. In fact, that can actually be a bonus because it's kind of grips. I'm just going to go around. Duct tape never wants to cover me. Another bit of a wrinkle. And do it a little bit to fold over. That, again, doesn't really matter for the purposes of this. And I'm just going to go all the way around it. I will say, Pringles tubs, you don't have to just use Pringles tubs. You can use bottles that kind of like wine comes in, or ports, or anything kind of round, even kitchen roll tubes. But you want to get the stiffer ones. So toilet roll tubes are a bit floppy generally. So if you can get some stiff cardboard tubes, it works quite well for this. Yeah, I'm making a nice mess of this one. But like I say, the mess actually is probably beneficial. That's what I keep telling myself anyway. And then I'll do a final one, and then I have to refine my holes. You should probably do your holes afterwards, but I tend to get overexcited and do things first. Right. Right, so there we go. We have a fairly rough, one of the things fell out while we're at it. We have a fairly rough, but otherwise kind of solid tube with lots of wrinkles on it for added grip. What you can also do at this stage is you could wrap it in string and then secure each end to add extra grip. But to be fair, I find my rats actually get on with it without that extra grip. They're quite solid. So I'm going to refine those holes, which should be easy to find now. So I'm just kind of looking on the inside and puncturing them through the duct tape. In fact, I can actually see them through daylight on here. So then all we need is trusty garden wire, which if you haven't already got, please get. You'll just use it all the way around the cage, and we're just poking it through. And this will be what we use to attach it to the cage bars. So you want to give yourself a decent amount of room, but it doesn't need to be stupidly long. So we're just putting 4 through on this. And this is effectively going to be a cheap, simple perch for the side of the cage. And I find the fact it's quite a broad diameter tends to work very well from a jumping point of view. They seem to use these quite a lot actually. What you've also got is a bit of a hole there which you can put a little bit of hay in and a little bit of treats in, but you could also, if you wanted to, cover that over. Might do that actually. I've got plenty of ones with holes in them. Let's change this one up a little bit. And that is one of those things, you can basically make of this what you want. You could add a few holes, like bigger holes to it, thread string through it and hang treats and such off it, or kind of add, if you've seen those parrot toys, which are lots and lots of ropes off them, they're quite fun, and you could do something like that. They're cheap and easy to replace, so actually if the rats destroy them, it's not the end of the world. All you need to do is eat some more Pringles, which is a real hardship, I'm sure you agree. Or similar tubes. You can be healthy on this, particularly it being January now. Oh, by the way, Happy New Year! Right, so we've got this kind of like roughly covered. I suspect I'll probably end up chewing it a bit, but I just thought I'd try it a bit different for once. So there you have it, a very simple, easy perch. So let's go and try and fit it to the cage and somehow restrain the girls while I do this. Right, so we're at the girl cage, so I've decided it's going to be there since the kittens have been getting a lot of stuff recently. And I'm going to probably put it in this space here. I think that'd be quite an interesting place for them. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to do this while the girls all want to be fed, because it's feeding time, isn't it, girls? And Burko. Right, let's get you off and no escaping. No, you jocks. Good girl. Hey, Mark. Yes, I love you all too. Right, so all we have to do to fasten on is then basically we're just threading the wire through. Boys are falling down upstairs. And fastening to the bars. Yes, that's my fingers. Let's not try and eat them. Unfortunately, they still taste a little bit of Pringles. So apparently it's really, really tasty. As you can see, Tato is ahead of the game. Oh, sorry, Fing. And decided to test this out. And Mog. So we've got 2 rats to try and balance this on. But it's okay. We'll get there. And I just need to get one more bit of wire on Chocobo. Yes, I can see you trying to escape. And there we have a basic platform, and then you can just tuck the wires away once done. No, I can see you. Right. Let's remove a few rats and give you a better view. So, really nicely modelled by a rat that's just escaped, as per usual. There, Mug can do it. As you can see, oh no, there's another one. It's chaos in the rat room. And another one. And Mug's going to go too. Right, no, I do need to restrain you at some point. Yes, so it's quite a kind of secure platform for them. Even Mr. Beefcake can sit on there perfectly fine. What I do find is they do quite often use this from jumping. So if you have several of them in your cage, they're likely to jump from one to the other. Right, I am going to reclaim some of my rats. There's one. But yes, so they will use it to kind of like jump from. They do find them quite interesting and useful. They're probably not going to... Yes, I can see you. Okay, Moomin outwitted me and has escaped. Hopefully not turning my microphone off in the process. And we have a rogue Moomin. Yeah, they're probably not going to start jumping on it straight away. That's fairly normal, but what you'll find is after a while it'll become a normal part of their cage and they will kind of use it like they will anything else. And like I say, I found that mine did jump on it quite a lot. So that's kind of quite a good little make that you can make yourself. And it also adds perches and such to the cage. In the main cage, what I should say is... What happened there, Chocobo? Somebody pushed Chocobo off. I do actually have quite a lot of kind of little perches and such that I use for jumping. When I say I use, the rats clearly use. What I try to do is, where I've got a little bit of space in the kind of front of the cage, I'll add a perch. So I've got, let's give you a bit of a look. I've got a perch down here. We've got more perches actually in the cage. I am going to have more escapees, I'll have to track them all down I think. In fact, let's open the cage door, that'll probably show it easier. So we've got more perches on here, various kind of little ledges. And what I find is if you have the ledges and you leave space, and it's quite important, what we don't want to do is make everything in the cage really easy to get from so they can step from one thing to the other. What we want to do is give them space where they have to kind of like work out good ways around things. So giving them lots of spaces and lots of perches, they will find their way across. So what you do need to be conscious of when you're talking about jumping is that the rats actually have kind of something to catch them if they fall, because they will fall. The boys are currently having an argument with the girls on top of the cage. So may have to stop them. Usually I'd put the boys out of the way when free ranging the girls, but they've escaped, so we'll go and sort them out. But yes, you need to make sure that you've got something to break falls. Come on, Mark, fingers in. And that then becomes quite an important thing when you're asking them to jump long distances. So things like, I've got a cargo net in mine, I've got actually the perches themselves act as quite a good option to stop them kind of like falling far. But bear that in mind, but still leave them that space that they can get from one point to another, because it really does help them enjoy the cage more. Right, so I'm going to stop this video for now, round up the girls, and then we're going to try out of cage jumping. Right, we're now ready for out of cage jumping. So I've got quite a simple setup here. I've got a little platform that I'm starting off very close to my knees, and I'm basically, good girl, should we give you a treat? Or you just want to escape? I'm basically just putting the rat girls on there, and giving them the chance to run across. So we've got Tato and Moomin here. Moomin obviously has poorer eyesight than Tato, and we need to kind of take this into account. Yes, clever girl. Are you gonna come, Mooms? Are you gonna come? What's this? So what you can sometimes do is provide a lighter colour for them to aim for, and actually that works well. Come on, Moomin. Should we try a little bit closer for you, just so you get the knack? That's always fun. Now, not all rats will really take to jumping, and it is something you should bear in mind, their kind of eye colour, because it is a lot to ask for a rat that's got short-sighted. Come on, you have to actually jump. I believe in you. So bear this in mind, and don't start more difficult. No, I think Moomin has decided that she's not a jumper. I've never tried this with either of them before, actually, and I did always think that Tato is probably my best bet. So I'm just going to pop Moomin out of the way at the moment. And then continue with Tato. Right, good girl. So we've done a little bit, so I'm going to move it a little bit further apart. Come on, Tate, good girl. Now, I should say this is my agility champion. This is also malt paste, and quite a good temptation for them. Right, Tato. Now the problem in the rat room is I've got quite limited dimensions. Good girl. Yes, yes. So I can only go so far before it becomes easier for her to jump somewhere else. But it'll be interesting to see whether the lure of malt paste convinces her that she wants to jump far over across to me. Now what I should say here is be aware of your drops when you're here. So what I typically do, and I've not needed to for the short distances, is I quite typically put a cushion down. So by putting that cushion down, it means if they do fall, they've got a nice soft landing. Yes, soft landing. So let's go a little bit further. Hey, Tato. And I'm using a bit of sound to attract attention. Good girl, clever girl. Which helps when you've got an animal that's quite short-sighted. It helps them kind of like them locate where you're trying to get to. Because I'm changing the distance, it is a little bit challenging for them. And as I get further away, my knees will become harder to see because they're quite a dark colour. So what I'm going to do, what have I got handy? Let's try that. So I've actually got a nice light, very chewed hammock of theirs, and this will help us see slightly better. It works really well if you've got a dark floor and two light surfaces to jumping between. It's quite a good tip for kind of getting them to get the most out of this. So let's try this again. Come on, Tato. Come on, Tato. Ooh, good girl. Just make sure you're holding on to the thing. Good girl. Yes. Tato is a very trainable rat, I should say. Not that I've ever really got round to training her, but she's just one of those that just kind of gets things. And she's nicely food motivated without becoming obsessed. Yes, you my girl. Good girl. Right, let's try a little bit further away. And I'm only moving it bit by bit because I don't want to push her beyond her abilities. Tato, Tato, what's this? Come on. Now she's realised that she can get quite close to the babies. Nope, nope, this way. Tato, come on. What's this? What's this? Come on. You can do it. You can do it. Come on. Come on, Tato. What's this? Come on. Come on. Good girl. Clever girl. So you can see that was actually a really good jump. Though she didn't really need to make that jump, she could have made a much shorter jump in the other direction. But by kind of knowing that she's going to get a reward for it and getting a bit of fuss and attention, which you do love, don't you, Missy? Yes, you're my girl. I'm a lovely girl. She's kind of showing off her agility on this one. I could try a little bit further. I'm not going to kind of keep on going forever here because, yes, you found the malt paste tube. Because really, it's something that I could keep going and I would do over several sessions. Come on, Tato. Come on, Tato. Good girl. Now you can see she's adapted to a longer jump here, to the point where she is jumping further than the gap. She's basically sussed out the game. The first few jumps were just her kind of coming to somewhere that she wanted to be. And then these latter few jumps, she's realised that what I'm doing is kind of challenging her to jump a long way. It does actually show the kind of rat's mind working, and she is very good at this kind of thing. In fact, if I do something with agility, it will be definitely Tato all the way, won't you, girl? Yes, my girl. Right, so that's the idea with jumping. You can continue extending it. I used to do quite long jumps with some of my rats in the past, Boys can do this just as well as girls. I would say with babies, be very conscious of where you're jumping, because I'm jumping in the rat room right now. Anywhere they go on the floor, I'm fine with. The room's adapted for it, it's their free range area. I'm not going to lose anyone. Babies in particular could fall on the floor and startle. So if you can do it in a pen, or you can do it in a safe room where they can't get away anywhere. I suspect you're just looking up my audio, miss. Don't you go in there? But yes, so I suspect, yeah, really think about where you're going to do it when you give it a go. But it's great fun, and actually the rats learn really well and quite enjoy it as well, particularly if you can include a little reward. Malt paste is just something that I use. I also use liver paste. There's just like little normal dried treats, even things like Rice Krispies are a treat for some rats. But just bear that in mind and make it a fun and enjoyable day for you. Now, best go before Tato jumps onto the floor, which she's perfectly capable of doing, aren't you, miss? So over and out from me, and I shall see you tomorrow.